The scent of rain on hot pavement usually comforted me. It smelled like beginnings. That Tuesday, it just smelled like a city sweating under a bruised sky. I'd left my jacket in Leo's apartment after our weekend away, the one where he'd held my hand through a scary movie and made pancakes shaped like hearts. He texted, "Forgot to tell you I grabbed it. It's on the back of my door. Spare key still under the pelican?" The pelican was a hideous lawn ornament his aunt had given him. We'd named it Phil. It was our little secret, the key. A token of trust. I let myself into the quiet building, my sandals slapping softly on the marble stairs. I didn't text to say I was coming. I thought I'd surprise him, maybe convince him to ditch his work-from-home afternoon for an early rainy day drink. My hand was on the cool metal of his doorknob when I heard it. Laughter. Not just his but a woman's, bright, bell-like, unfamiliar. My stomach did a slow, cold roll. I pushed the door open, the movement silent on well-oiled hinges. The scene was a snapshot, perfectly composed and utterly devastating. They were framed by his big living room window, the gray light washing over them. Leo. My Leo. His back was mostly to me, but I knew the slope of his shoulders, the way his dark hair curled against his neck. And her. A blonde, willowy thing, perched on the windowsill, her face tilted up to his like a flower to the sun. He was leaning in, one hand braced on the glass beside her head. Then he moved. It wasn't a passionate, cinematic kiss. It was slow, deliberate. A meeting of mouths that spoke of familiarity, of practice. Her hand came up to cup his jaw, a gesture so intimate it felt like a physical blow to my chest. I stopped breathing. I should have slammed the door. I should have screamed. I became a statue carved from ice, watching my world fracture. He pulled back just an inch, his forehead resting against hers. And he spoke. His voice, usually so warm when it spoke to me, was laced with a weary, confiding frustration I knew all too well, except it had never been directed about me to someone else. God, it's just such a relief to be with someone, easy, he sighed, the sound heavy with manufactured exhaustion. With Alara it's always something. I'm just so exhausting, you know? She's always sick or acting fragile. It's like walking on eggshells made of tissue paper. He wrapped his arm around the blonde's shoulders, pulling her into his side as he complained about me. As he reduced 3 years of my love, my chronic illness I'd trusted him with, my occasional sadness, to a burdensome caricature. The blonde made a sympathetic noise, nuzzling into his neck. You poor thing. She sounds draining. You have no idea, he murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. It's constant. The ice in my veins shattered into a million piercing shards. A sound escaped me, a small wounded thing, barely a gasp. Leo's head snapped around. His eyes, those hazel eyes I'd traced in the dawn light 100 times, widened in pure, unadulterated panic. The color drained from his face. Alara. The blonde blinked, looking from him to me with a faint, curious smile, not yet comprehending the nuclear bomb that had just detonated in the room. All the words, the accusations, the screams, the tears, they died in my throat. What was there to say? He'd said it all. I was the exhausting one. The sick one. The fragile burden. He'd built his case and I'd walked in on him presenting it to the jury. I looked at my jacket hanging innocently on the back of the door. A symbol of all the little pieces of my life I'd left in this space. I didn't move towards it. I found my voice. It wasn't the scream I expected. It was flat, cold, and absolutely steady. I see. Alara, wait, it's not? He started, untangling himself from the blonde, taking a step toward me. Don't. The single word cut through the air. I looked at the blonde, who was now frowning, finally putting the pieces together. He's all yours. Consider the eggshells cleared. I turned and walked out. I closed the door softly behind me, a quiet, final click. I walked down the stairs, my legs moving on autopilot. I passed Phil the pelican, his goofy beak a grotesque mockery of our former intimacy. I didn't retrieve the key. Let him find it. Let him remember. The rain had started, a fine, cool mist. I walked into it, letting it mix with the hot tears that finally broke free, silent and relentless. He wanted easy. He wanted uncomplicated. He'd gotten his wish. I left. Just like he wanted. The next 72 hours were a blur of tactical survival. I called in sick to work. A genuine sick day, my body reacting to the shock with a profound fatigue that felt bone deep. I muted his number, then blocked it on every platform I could think of. I didn't throw out his things immediately. That felt too dramatic, too energizing. I simply gathered everything: the toothbrush, the stray band t-shirt, the book he'd been reading, and put it in a cardboard box in the closet. Out of sight. My best friend, Maya, appeared on my doorstep the evening of the third day, bearing Thai food and a bottle of gin. She'd gotten the tearful, snot-filled summary over the phone. Now she was in battle mode. "Okay," she said, dumping spring rolls onto a plate. "We're not doing the woe is me, I'm so exhausting spiral. He's a gaslighting asshole." "Say it." I poked at a noodle. "He's a gaslighting asshole." Louder. And with feeling. "He's a gaslighting asshole." Came out as a croak, then a sob, then a laugh that hurt my ribs. God, Maya, he made it sound like my autoimmune stuff was just me being difficult. Like a choice. Because he's a weak-willed, spineless worm who needed to make himself the victim to justify being a cheat, she said matter-of-factly. His new audience buys it? Great. They deserve each other. You are not fragile. You are a goddamn warrior who deals with real pain and still gets up every day. He's the fragile one, fabricating drama. Her words were a lifeline. But in the quiet of the night, his voice echoed. Exhausting. Always sick. Fragile. Was there truth in it? Had I leaned on him too much during the flares? Had my need for quiet nights, for understanding, been too much? The fourth day I forced myself to shower, to put on real clothes. I went to the small art supply store I loved, just to be around colors that weren't the gray of that rainy window. I was staring blankly at a rack of cadmium yellow acrylics when a voice spoke beside me. Overwhelming, isn't it? The potential of all this blank paper. I turned. The man was tall, with kind eyes the color of the sage green paint tube in his hand. He had the relaxed look of someone who belonged here, smudges of clay or charcoal on his forearms. He wasn't flirting, he was just making an observation. Terrifying, I admitted, my voice rusty from disuse. All that white space. One wrong line. "Ah, but that's the joy," he said, smiling. "No line is wrong. It's just a step to the next line. You just have to start." He selected a sketch pad and gave me a small, acknowledging nod before moving toward the register. It was a 30-second interaction. It didn't heal me, but it was a pinprick of light. A reminder that the world contained other voices, other perspectives, beyond the one that had defined me as a burden. I bought the sketch pad and a charcoal pencil. I didn't draw anything that day. I just made a single, dark, sweeping line across the first page. Felt like a declaration. My phone, when I checked it later, was flooded. Not from Leo's number. It was silent, blocked. But from our mutual friends. Concerned texts. "Heard you and Leo hit a rough patch? Leo's saying you just left, won't talk to him, he's worried sick." Worried sick. The irony was a bitter pill. I drafted a single group text. "Leo and I are over. I don't wish to discuss the details. I appreciate your concern, but I need space right now." I hit send before I could second guess it. The fallout was immediate. Some friends respected it. Others pushed. "But he's so devastated, Alara. Can't you just talk to him?" He was playing the part perfectly. The confused, caring boyfriend, blindsided by his fragile girlfriend's sudden departure. I could see the narrative solidifying around me, with me cast as the unstable villain. The fury that rose then was clean and sharp, a scalpel cutting through the fog of grief. He didn't get to do this. He didn't get to kiss another woman, eviscerate my character, and then control the story. I was done being fragile. I was done being exhausting. I was just done. A week after the fracture, the flowers arrived. A massive, oppressive bouquet of blood-red roses and white lilies that screamed funeral. The card, in his achingly familiar scrawl, read, "Alara, we need to talk. I'm going out of my mind. I miss you. Please, Leo." I stared at it, the cloying scent of the lilies triggering a phantom nausea. Miss me? He'd missed me so much he'd had his tongue down another woman's throat. I carried the vase directly to the dumpster in my apartment complex's alley, the water sloshing over my wrist like a cold accusation. The thud of ceramic meeting trash was satisfying. The next day, a handwritten letter arrived, slipped under my door. 3 pages of looping, frantic script. A monumental mistake. She meant nothing. "You're the love of my life. I was stressed, you were distant, I was weak." I never meant those things I said. I was just trying to explain us to her. It came out wrong. You know how I get. You know how I get. That was a phrase I did know. It was his all-purpose excuse for thoughtlessness, for cancelled plans, for minor betrayals. It had never covered a betrayal of this magnitude. I held the pages over my kitchen sink, struck a match, and watched his excuses curl into black, fragile ash. The smoke alarm remained silent. A small mercy. My own silence, I realized, was my greatest weapon. It denied him the drama, the confrontation, the chance to perform his remorse. It rendered his elaborate apologies meaningless, sent into a void. He was an actor on a stage, shouting his lines to an empty, dark house. Maya became my strategist and my shield. He's love-bombing, she declared, scrolling through the messages from mutual friends she was fielding. Classic narcissistic playbook. Devalue then hoover. He's trying to suck you back in with grand gestures because your quiet exit didn't give him the narrative control he wanted. It feels insane, I said, my fingers tracing the charcoal line in my sketchpad. I'd started drawing again. Abstract, angry swirls of darkness with occasional hard-won slashes of color. That he thinks flowers can fix this. He doesn't think they'll fix it. He thinks they'll make you react. Any reaction is fuel. Your silence is starving him. He was right. The attempts escalated in their desperation. He showed up at my office. I saw him through the glass doors of the lobby, pacing, looking tragically handsome and suitably tormented. My heart didn't flutter. It seized with a cold, slick fear. I used the back entrance, texting my boss a vague excuse about a migraine. Then he cornered Maya at her favorite coffee shop. She reported it to me that evening, her face flushed with indignation. He looked like hell, Alara. Genuinely. Bags under his eyes, hair a mess. He practically begged me for 5 minutes. What did you say? Asked my voice small. I said, Leo, the only thing more exhausting than a fragile woman is a fragile man. Buy your own latte and get out of my sight. She grinned, a fierce, proud thing. You should have seen his face. He had no script for that. A laugh burst out of me, sharp and surprising. It felt good. Thank you. Don't thank me. He's unraveling. It's gross to watch, but it's proof you're doing the right thing. He's realizing he can't control this story. You took the pen away. I'd taken the pen away. The thought was empowering. This wasn't just about getting over him. It was about reclaiming the narrative of my own life from the one who'd tried to scribble over it with lies. A month post-fracture, I had my first major flare-up. The familiar, deep bone ache, the crushing fatigue that made getting out of bed feel like a Herculean task. In the past, I'd call Leo. He'd bring me tea, heat up the rice sock for my joints, and while his care was sometimes tinged with a barely concealed impatience, it was care nonetheless. Now I was alone, and it was terrifying. I managed to drag myself to the kitchen for water and medication. I texted Maya. Flare. Might be radio silent for a day or two. All good, just resting. Her reply was instant. Soup delivery en route. DoorDash code is Lovumi. Rest. You are a mighty oak, not a fragile twig. Remember that. Tears welled, the good kind. This was my support system. Real, unconditional, without theatrics. I slept for 16 hours. When I surfaced, weak but clear-headed, there was a new email. From an address I didn't recognize, but the style was unmistakably Leo. Lara. I know you're blocking me. I drove by and saw the lights off for 2 days. Are you okay? Is it your illness? Please just let me know you're alright. I'm worried sick about you. This silence is killing me. You're punishing me in the worst way possible. Just talk to me. Let me explain. There's always, Leo. The anger returned, a white-hot coal in my chest. Punishing him. He'd made my pain my necessary withdrawal to heal my actual physical body about his suffering. My illness was again a tool, a weapon in his narrative of persecution. I didn't delete it. I opened a new document and began to type. I didn't address it to him. I wrote for myself. I'm not punishing you. I am protecting myself. My silence is not a weapon. It is a wall. You stood on the other side of a window and defined my life as a burden to another woman. You do not get to define my recovery, my pain, or my silence now. My illness is mine. It is not a plot point in your drama. It is my reality. You forfeited the right to worry about me the moment you used it as a punchline. I saved it in a folder labeled nonsense. I would never send it. But writing it felt like drawing another bold, definitive line. The following weekend, Maya forcibly extracted me from my apartment for, art therapy. She took me to a monthly street fair in a trendy neighborhood, full of local craft booths and food trucks. The sun was out and the sheer normalcy of it, the smell of kettle corn, the babble of crowds, the vibrant colors of handmade jewelry and prints, was a balm. We were debating the merits of vegan ice cream when I saw him. Not Leo. The man from the art store. He was manning a booth a few stalls down. Not a booth really, more a pop-up gallery display of stunning ceramic pieces. Elegant, irregular vases with glazes that flowed like captured landscapes, sculptural bowls that looked like abstracted forests. He was talking animatedly to a customer, his hands shaping the air as he described a firing technique. "Whoa," Maya whispered, following my gaze. "Is that clay on his hands or is he just happy to see us?" "Art store guy," I murmured back. "You didn't tell me art store guy looked like a rugged, artsy Chris Hemsworth." "He doesn't," I said, but I couldn't look away. There was a grounded, peaceful energy about him, a total absorption in his work that was the polar opposite of Leo's performative intensity. As the customer left with a carefully wrapped bowl, his eyes scanned the crowd and landed on me. There was a flicker of recognition, then a warm, genuine smile. He nodded hello. Maya nudged me hard. "Go. Talk about lines or clay or the weather. Just go." "I can't just." "You can. You're a single, fierce warrior oak. Now go admire his pots." I took a breath, willed my feet to move and walked over to his display. Up close, the pieces were even more beautiful. Textured, organic, full of quiet strength. "The line led you here," he said, his voice easy without a trace of pickup line smarm. I managed a smile. "It did. These are incredible. The glazes. They look alive." His face lit up. "Thank you. That's the goal. It's all about surrender in the kiln. You control the composition, the clay, the initial glaze. But the fire has the final say. You have to embrace the unexpected." He gestured to a vase with a deep blue crackle running through ochre. This one was a happy accident. I was sure I'd ruined it. "It's my favorite," I said and meant it. The flaw was what made it breathtaking. "Mine too." He extended a hand, slightly dusty with dry clay. "I'm Silas, by the way." I took it. His grip was firm, warm. "Ilara." "Ilara," he repeated as if testing the sound. "A good strong name." We talked for 10 minutes about raku firing, about the feel of clay, about the street fair. It was easy. Light. No subtext, no performance, no walking on eggshells. He asked what I did, and when I mentioned I was trying to draw again, he looked genuinely interested, not like he was just waiting for his turn to talk. "The blank page is the hardest part," he said. "But you just have to make that first mark. Trust that the next one will follow." It was an echo of our first conversation. A philosophy. Maya appeared then, linking her arm through mine with exaggerated cheer. "Sorry to interrupt, but our ice cream is melting. So lovely to meet you, Silas." As she pulled me away, Silas smiled. "Hope to see you again, Ilara. The art store is just around the corner on Maple." He said it casually, an open-ended invitation without pressure. "Maybe you will," I said and let Maya drag me off. "He's perfect," she hissed as we walked. "Kind, employed, hot, and he talks to you like you're a human being, not a problem to be managed." "It was just a conversation," I said, but my heart was beating a little faster, and not from anxiety. It was from something else. Something that felt suspiciously like a spark. That night, for the first time since the fracture, I didn't dream of that rainy window. I dreamt of swirling, beautiful glazes, of clay taking shape under confident hands, and of a single, strong charcoal line leading me forward into a blank, promising white space. I didn't go to the art store on Maple the next day, or the day after. A stubborn, fearful part of me, still whispering in Leo's voice, argued that it was too soon, that it was a betrayal of the pain I was supposed to be wallowing in, that I was just being needy. I fought it by cleaning my apartment with a vengeance, scrubbing away imaginary traces of the past. But the memory of Silas's calm presence, the way he'd looked at his pottery not with pride, but with a kind of respectful curiosity, lingered. It was the opposite of how Leo had looked at me in the end, like a problem he'd already solved by dismissing it. A week after the street fair, armed with a need for a specific shade of Payne's gray watercolor, I finally pushed open the door to the Gilded Page. A bell tinkled overhead. The store was a wonderful chaos of scents. turpentine, paper, beeswax, and coffee from a small pot in the back. And there he was, behind the counter, this time talking to an older woman about the archival quality of different sketchpads. Acid-free is essential if you want it to last, he was saying, his tone patient and knowledgeable. Otherwise, in 50 years, your masterpiece will be the color of tea and crumble at the edges. He glanced up as I entered, and the smile that spread across his face wasn't one of slick recognition, but of simple, unfeigned pleasure. Elara. The line bringer. The older woman chuckled, took her sketchpad and left. I approached the counter, feeling oddly self-conscious. Hi. Payne's Gray, I said, my voice sounding too loud in the quiet shop. Excellent choice. Somber but profound. Right this way. He came out from behind the counter and led me to the wall of watercolor tubes. He didn't just point, he pulled down 2 different brands. This one has a finer grind, more transparent. This one granulates more. See the specs? It gives a more textured, atmospheric feel. Depends on what you're after. I stared at him. Leo had never shown the slightest interest in my art. He'd called it a nice hobby, usually when he was waiting for me to finish so we could go to dinner. I'm not sure. Atmospheric, I guess. Atmospheric it is. He handed me the tube. Working on something stormy? Something like that, I said, taking it. Our fingers brushed. You work here? I own it, he said, gesturing around the small, cluttered space with affection. The pottery is the main gig, but this place, it's my sanctuary. And it pays the rent on the studio in the back. You have a studio here? Want to see it? The invitation was so direct, so without guile, that it disarmed me completely. I wouldn't want to interrupt. You'd be doing me a favor. I'm wedging clay. It's therapeutic, but company is better. He led me through a beaded curtain behind the counter into a back room that was a glorious explosion of creativity. A large pottery wheel sat centered under a skylight. Shelves lined the walls, filled with works in progress. Some raw, bisque-fired white, others glazed and waiting for their final fire. Canvases leaned against another wall, not his I guessed, but from local artists he supported. In the center of the room was a heavy wooden table, and on it sat a large lump of dark gray clay. Wedging, he explained, going to the sink to wash his hands, is like kneading bread. Gets the air bubbles out, aligns the particles, makes the clay uniform and workable. He began to heave the clay onto the table, then slam it down, fold it, and repeat. The motion was powerful, rhythmic, grounding. I watched, mesmerized by the physicality of it. It looks like it requires some anger management. He laughed, a rich, warm sound. Sometimes. But mostly it requires presence. You can't think about your taxes or an argument you had while you're doing this. You have to be right here in the feel of it. He looked at me. You want to try? Oh, I'd probably ruin it. It's clay, he said simply. It forgives. It's the most forgiving medium there is. Until you fire it. Then the decisions are permanent. He gestured me over. I set down my bag and tentatively placed my hands on the cool, dense mass. He guided my movements, his hands hovering near mine without touching. Heel of your hand, push, fold, turn. Find a rhythm. I pushed. It was harder than it looked. I folded. The clay yielded, then resisted. After a few minutes, my shoulders began to loosen. The only sound was our breathing and the soft thwomp of clay on wood. My mind, usually a cacophony of Leo's words and my own recriminations, went quiet. I was right there in the feel of it. See, Silas said softly after a while. Present. I looked up at him. He was watching the clay, a small, satisfied smile on his face. No expectation. No judgment. Just a shared moment in a sunlit studio. It's centering, I admitted. That's the word. I stayed for an hour. He made us tea in one of his handmade mugs. A sturdy, comforting thing with a glaze that swirled from deep blue to earthy brown. We talked about art, about the city, about the terrible coffee at the street fair. He asked about my drawing and I found myself telling him about my abandoned sketchbook after college, about how I'd only just picked it up again. What stopped you? He asked, leaning against his work table. The honest answer was a complex knot of things. Work, fatigue, Leo's subtle dismissal. I gave a simpler truth. Life. And a voice in my head that said it wasn't important. He nodded slowly. I know that voice. Mine sounds like my very practical, very accountant father. You have to feed it a cookie and tell it to take a nap in the other room. I laughed, a real, unguarded laugh that felt strange and wonderful in my throat. I'll try that. When I left, with my pains gray and a sense of calm I hadn't felt in months, he said, the studio's usually open in the afternoons. If you ever need to get out of your head. No pressure. Thank you, Silas. Really. Walking home, the city felt different. Less hostile. The blank page in my sketchbook didn't feel terrifying. It felt like potential. That night I opened to a new page. I didn't think. I wet the paper, loaded my brush with the deep, cool gray and let it flow. It became a sky, heavy with unshed rain, but in the distance, I scraped out a thin, sharp line of light with the edge of my nail. It wasn't a masterpiece, but it was a first mark, and it felt like a beginning. The piece was fragile, of course. Leo, denied any direct response, began weaponizing our shared world. A mutual friend, Ben, called me, his tone strained. Hey. Look, I don't want to get in the middle, but Leo came by last night. He's a mess, man. He says you've completely ghosted him, that you won't even let him explain. He says he's worried you're having some kind of breakdown, that you're not in your right mind. The anger was instantaneous, a fire in my veins. Did he tell you why I left, Ben? Pause. He said you had a fight, that you misinterpreted something you saw and just ran with it. He said you're being volatile. Another word for fragile, for exhausting. He was meticulously rebuilding the narrative, painting me as the emotionally unstable ex. I saw him kissing another woman in his apartment, Ben. He had his arm around her and was telling her I was exhausting, always sick and fragile. That's not a misinterpretation. That's a fact. Silence on the line. Then a low exhale. Shit. He didn't, he said it wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. I'm not having a breakdown. I am protecting myself from a man who lied to my face and is now lying about me to my friends. Please respect that. Jesus, Silera. I'm sorry. I didn't know. He's been so persuasive. He always is, I said tiredly. Please don't feed him information about me. Anything you know he'll twist. After I hung up, I trembled with rage. He was in my walls, poisoning my support system. I felt hunted. I needed an outlet that wasn't Maya, who would just rage on my behalf. Almost without thinking, I found myself walking to the gilded page. The bell tinkled. Silas was helping a customer choose framing materials. He saw me, took in my probably stormy expression and gave me a small, understanding nod. When the customer left, he didn't ask any questions. The clay is particularly receptive today, he said, wiping his hands on a rag. Just came out of the Deering pug mill. It's begging to be thrown. I don't know how to throw a pot, I said, my voice tight. Today seems like a good day to learn. He sat me at the wheel, showed me how to center the lump of clay, a battle of wills that required brute force and subtle finesse. My first 3 attempts collapsed into wobbly, pathetic lumps. Each failure felt like a metaphor. I gritted my teeth, my hands covered in sloppy slip. Your hands are fighting each other, Silas observed, kneeling beside me. The left steadies the right shapes. They have to work in concert. And you're trying to control it. You have to guide it. Let the wheel and the clay do half the work. Feel for the center. It's there. On the 4th lump, I closed my eyes. I stopped trying to force it into submission. I placed my wet hands around the cool, spinning mass and just felt. I felt the wobble, the uneven rhythm. I applied pressure, not with fury but with intention. Slowly, miraculously, the wobbling ceased. The clay became a smooth, spinning cone under my palms. I opened my eyes. It was centered. A wave of pure, triumphant satisfaction washed through me, so potent it brought sudden, hot tears to my eyes. I wasn't crying from sadness but from the release of it. I could center something. There you go, Silas said softly, no fanfare in his voice. Now you can make anything. I didn't make a masterpiece. I made a small, lopsided bowl. But it was mine. I had taken chaos and spinning force and found the calm center. After I'd cleaned up, we sat in the studio with more tea. I didn't tell him about Leo, not in detail. But I said, someone is trying to rewrite a story to make me the villain. It's infuriating. Silas looked at his own hands, speckled with dry clay. My ex-wife, he said, the words quiet but clear, was an expert at that. Every problem was my fault for not understanding, for not trying hard enough, for being too absorbed in my little pottery thing. It took me a long time to realize I wasn't the author of my own failures in her story. I was just a character she'd written to justify her own choices. His confession hung in the air, a gift of solidarity. He understood. Not the specifics but the violation of it. "What did you do?" I asked. "I left the narrative," he said, meeting my eyes. I stopped reading her versions. I started writing my own, one lump of clay at a time. It's a slower story. Less drama. But it's true. I left the narrative. That was exactly what I had done. And what Leo was so desperately trying to pull me back into. "This helps," I said, gesturing to the wheel, the studio. "More than you know." "Anytime," he said. And I knew he meant it. As I was leaving, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. My blood ran cold. "It's Leo. Please. I'm outside your building. I just need 5 minutes to see your face to know you're okay. I can't live like this. You're destroying me." The fear returned, cold and slick. He'd gotten a new number. He was at my home. The sanctuary was breached. I showed the text to Silas, my hand shaking. His expression hardened, not with anger but with a firm resolve. "That's not love. That's a siege." He thought for a moment. "Do you want to go home?" I shook my head, mute. "You have 2 choices. Call the police. Or wait him out somewhere safe." He paused. "Or a third. You have dinner with me. At a very public, very well-lit tapas place around the corner. And we give him nothing." I looked at him, this near stranger who offered not dramatic rescue but quiet, firm options. He wasn't telling me what to do. He was giving me back the pen. I took a deep, shuddering breath. The fear was still there, but beneath it was that new, solid feeling from centering the clay. "Tapas," I said, my voice firming. "But I'm buying. To thank you for the clay therapy." A real smile touched his eyes. "Deal." I texted Maya. "Leo's at my building with a new number. I'm safe with a friend. Having dinner out. Can you be on standby?" Her reply was instant. "OMW. I'll make sure he sees me and knows you're not alone. Stay away as long as you need. Friend. Details later." I turned my phone to silent, tucked it away, and followed Silas out into the evening. I was not going home. I was not giving Leo his audience. I was having tapas with a potter who understood about leaving narratives behind. It was, I decided, a much better chapter. The tapas place was everything Silas promised. Warm, noisy, and bustling with the cheerful clatter of a Friday night. We were seated at a small tiled table near the back, surrounded by the lively hum of conversation that felt like a protective force field. I kept my phone face down, a tiny act of defiance. "So," Silas said after we'd ordered patatas bravas and grilled octopus. "The siege artist. Is this a regular performance?" The way he phrased it, a performance, stripped Leo's drama of its power, framing it as tedious theater. I managed a weak smile. "It's a new repertoire. The old one was more covert manipulation. This is the bombastic, tragic finale he never got to play. The unmet need for a dramatic climax." He nodded sagely, pouring us both glasses of fruity red sangria from the small pitcher. My ex favored the slow burn critique. The disappointed sigh, as a weapon of mass destruction. This seems more operatic. Talking about it with him in this context made it feel distant. Manageable. It is. Flowers, letters, recruiting my friends as messengers. Now he's moved to physical staging. It's exhausting. The word slipped out. Exhausting. I flinched, waiting for the familiar internal echo of Leo's dismissal. But Silas just took a sip of his drink, his gaze thoughtful. "It's designed to be," he said simply. "That's the point. To wear you down until capitulation seems easier than resistance. It's a brutal strategy." His analysis was so clinical, so devoid of the emotional charge that usually suffocated me, that it allowed me to breathe. He said I was exhausting. That's why he stepped out. Because my needs were too much. Silas was silent for a long moment, his eyes on my face. "Let me guess," he said finally, his voice gentle. "Your needs were things like communication, respect, and not being cheated on. Truly outrageous demands." A startled laugh hiccuped out of me, followed by a sudden press of tears behind my eyes. He had distilled 3 years of confused gaslighting into one crystal-clear sentence. "When you put it like that. I'm a simple potter," he said with a shrug. Ideal in fundamentals. Shape, structure, integrity. A vessel that can't hold water is flawed in its making, not in the water's desire to be held. The metaphor landed deep. I saw myself for a moment as a vessel Leo had tried to reshape to hold his own insecurities, and then blamed for cracking under the pressure. I wasn't flawed. The making had been wrong. Our food arrived. As we ate, the conversation drifted. To travel, he'd spent a year in Japan studying with a master potter. To terrible movies, a shared love of cheesy 80s sci-fi. To the best place in the city to watch a sunset. It was easy. It was normal. For 2 hours I didn't feel like a victim or a burden. I felt like a person having dinner with an interesting, kind man. My phone, when I finally checked it discreetly under the table, showed a cascade of texts from Maya. 8:15 p.m. I'm here. He's pacing by the main doors like a lost puppy. Looking tragic. Barf. 8:30 p.m. Made eye contact. Gave him my best smile. He looked away first. For 8:45 p.m. He's on the phone gesturing wildly. Probably complaining about you to some other poor soul. 9 p.m. He's leaving. Slumped shoulders the whole bit. Oscar-worthy exit. Coast is clear when you're ready. How's the friend? I showed the last one to Silas. The siege has lifted. Good, he said. Do you feel ready to go back? I considered it. The thought of my empty apartment, now violated by the knowledge he'd been lurking outside, felt cold and unwelcoming. I do. But I think I'll take a long, circuitous route. Just in case. Wise. He paid the bill before I could argue, waving off my protest. You can get the next one. And there will be a next one if you want. No pressure, no drama. Just tapas. We walked out into the cool night air. The city felt different again. Less like a battleground, more like a place where tapas and kindness existed alongside the drama. He walked me to the corner that led to my street. Thank you, Silas. For all of it. The clay, the dinner, the sanity. Thank you for the company, Alara. He shoved his hands in his pockets. The studio's open tomorrow. I'll be glazing. It's a messy, colorful process. Good for the soul. I might just take you up on that. I walked home alert but not terrified. My apartment was dark, quiet, and still felt vaguely tainted. I opened all the windows to let in the night air, scouring out the psychic presence. Then I took out my sketchbook and my new Payne's Gray. I painted the tapas bar. A quick, lively sketch of our corner table, the shapes of us just suggestions, the focus on the glow of the overhead light and the dark, safe space around it. I labeled it in the margin. Sanctuary, 9:47 p.m. The next morning I went to the studio. True to his word, Silas was up to his elbows in color. The big work table was covered with newspaper and lined with small buckets of vibrant glazes. Cobalt blue, iron red, celadone green, a buttery yellow. He was carefully dipping the rim of a bisque-fired bowl into a deep crimson. Morning, he said, not looking up, his concentration complete. Goggles are on the shelf. Glazing is a commitment. Once it's on, it's on. I put on the safety goggles, feeling like a mad scientist. What's the plan? This batch is for a reduction firing. The flame steals oxygen from the glazes, changes the chemistry, the colors. It's alchemy. You can guide it, but you can't control it. He handed me a simple cylindrical vase. This one's sturdy. Try. Brush-on glazes are more forgiving for a first-timer. Think about what you want to emphasize. The shape. A band of color. An emotion. I looked at the blank, chalky white form. It felt like another first mark. I chose 3 glazes. The cobalt, the celadone, and a glossy black. I didn't plan. I just started painting wide, uneven bands of blue and green, letting them overlap in the middle to create a murky, oceanic blend. At the top, near the rim, I painted a thick, solid band of black. Interesting, Silas murmured, watching. Heavy at the top. Weighty. It feels grounded, I said, surprising myself. The dark isn't oppressive. It's a lid. A boundary. He nodded as if that made perfect sense. A vessel with strong boundaries. Essential. We worked in companionable silence for an hour, the only sounds the swish of brushes and the soft clink of pottery. It was profoundly peaceful. My phone, which I'd left in my bag, was out of sight, out of mind. Later, as we were cleaning brushes, he asked, "Has the siege artist resumed his campaign?" I sighed. A few, I'm so lost without you, texts from the new number last night. I blocked it. Maya says he's been calling mutual friends, telling them he's fearing for my well-being since I'm isolating myself. Classic, Silas said, his mouth a firm line. Reframe the victim's self-protection as a symptom of instability. It's a very effective smear. How do you stop it? The question was a plea. You can't stop him from talking, he said, running clean water over a brush until it ran clear. You can only live your truth so brightly and consistently that his story starts to sound as ridiculous as it is. And you protect your space. Legally if you have to. He looked at me. Have you considered a cease and desist? It's not a nuclear option. It's a boundary. This behavior will not be tolerated in legalese. The idea sent a thrill of both fear and power through me. A legal boundary. The ultimate, no. I don't know if it's that bad. He showed up at your home uninvited after you've made your disengagement clear. He's harassing your friends to get to you. He's attempting to damage your reputation. Define that bad, he said, not unkindly. He was right. I was still minimizing, a habit left over from trying to make my needs smaller for Leo. I'll think about it. Good. He hung the brushes to dry. Now the important question. Are you free next Saturday? There's a terrible community theater production of Macbeth in the park. So bad it circles back to Sublime. I go every year. I bring a picnic and heckle respectfully. I laughed. That sounds perfectly undramatic. I'd love to. The following week held a new rhythm. Mornings were for work and managing the lingering fallout of Leo's whispers. Afternoons, when I could, were for the studio. I didn't always work with clay. Sometimes I just drew in the corner, soothed by the smell of earth and the sound of the wheel. Silas was a steady, undemanding presence. Our conversations meandered. We debated the best pizza topping. He was a purist. I argued for pineapple as a valid, if controversial, choice. He told me stories about his disastrous first gallery show. I shared my dream of illustrating a children's book. It was friendship. A simple, nourishing thing I hadn't realized I'd been starving for. Saturday arrived, and with it a low-level anxiety. A date. It was a date, wasn't it? The thought was terrifying. I hadn't been on a date with anyone but Leo in over 4 years. I almost cancelled. But the memory of tapas of the studio's piece propelled me forward. We met at the park with a ludicrous picnic. Fancy cheeses, crusty bread, grapes, and a truly terrible bottle of boxed wine he insisted was part of the tradition. The play was, as promised, gloriously awful. The actor playing Macbeth had a pronounced lisp, and Lady Macbeth's out-damned spot monologue was delivered with the passion of someone reading a grocery list. We stifled laughter into our napkins. He's not unkind, is he? Silas whispered during a particularly wooden soliloquy. He's giving it his all. It's just that his all is tragically small. It was the perfect way to view it. Not with cruelty, but with a detached, compassionate humor. It made me think of Leo's performance. Tragically small, given his all, but ultimately not worthy of my tears. As the sunset painted the sky in streaks of orange and purple, we packed up. The air between us had shifted, charged with a gentle, tentative awareness. Walking back to the street, our hands brushed. Once, twice. Elara, he said, stopping under a sprawling oak tree. Yes. He looked at me, his face soft in the twilight. I like you. A lot. I want to be clear about that. But I also see the fortress walls you're still building, brick by brick. They're good walls. Necessary walls. I don't want to be a siege engine trying to knock them down. I'd like to be allowed to visit inside the gates sometime. When you're ready. No timeline. His words were a balm. He saw my protection not as a rejection of him, but as a necessary project of self-preservation. He wasn't demanding entry. He was asking for an invitation. The gates are rusty, I said, my throat tight. And the courtyard is a mess. There's a lot of rubble. I'm good with rubble, he said, a smile touching his eyes. I'm a potter. I make beautiful things from dust and earth and water. He walked me all the way to my door. He didn't try to kiss me. He just squeezed my hand, a warm, firm pressure. Good night, Elara. Good night, Silas. I floated into my apartment. For the first time since the fracture, the space felt filled not with absence or fear, but with a quiet, glowing potential. I wasn't ready for a new love story, but I was ready for a prologue. One written at my own pace in my own hand. I opened my sketchbook to a fresh page. This time I didn't reach for the Payne's gray. I chose a burnt sienna, a warm, earthy red. And I began to draw the oak tree from the park, its roots deep and strong, its branches reaching wide under a twilight sky. It was just a tree, but it felt like a promise. The oak tree sketch, warm and rooted, stayed taped to my fridge. A quiet reminder of a night that felt like a turning point. The rhythm of my new life solidified. Work, studio, Maya's fierce friendship, and the slow, gentle unfurling of something with Silas that felt more like discovery than pursuit. Leo's campaign, denied its primary audience, grew more diffuse but no less insidious. Whispers among distant acquaintances reached me. I heard Alara had a mental break. Leo's so worried she's cut everyone off. The narrative was metastasizing in the spaces I'd vacated. My anger hardened into a cold, clear resolve. Silas's suggestion of a cease and desist letter no longer felt extreme. It felt like a necessary piece of armor. With Maya's help, her fiancé was a lawyer. I drafted a simple, unequivocal document. It stated that all contact, direct or through third parties, must cease. It listed the behaviors. Showing up at my home and workplace, harassing my friends, disseminating false information about my mental state. It was clinical. It was powerful. We sent it certified mail to his apartment. The day it was marked delivered, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. This was a line in the sand drawn in legal ink. I expected retaliation. A storm. Instead there was silence. A profound, eerie quiet. The new numbers stopped texting. The friends stopped calling with concerned updates. It was as if a switch had been flipped. The relief was so immense it felt like a physical unclenching of muscles I'd held taut for months. He's a coward at his core, Maya said over celebratory margaritas. The second there's a real-world consequence, a paper trail, he folds. He only thrives in the shadows of he said she said. He was likely right. The silence felt less like peace and more like the calm eye of a hurricane. I kept my guard up, but I also let myself breathe. This new breath found its way into my time with Silas. With the external siege lifted, I could finally look inward at the internal damage. We were in his studio and I was attempting to throw a taller, thinner vessel. It kept collapsing. It's too ambitious, I groaned, watching the clay wilt into a wobbly mess for the third time. It's not the ambition, Silas said, watching my hands. You're afraid of its height. You're not supporting it fully because you're scared it'll fall. So you hesitate, and your hesitation guarantees the fall. The metaphor was too apartment. I sat back, defeated. How do you stop being afraid it'll fall? You commit, he said, moving behind me. He didn't touch the clay or my hands. He just stood there, a steady presence. You give it consistent, upward pressure. You trust the strength of the clay and the speed of the wheel. And you accept that sometimes it will fall. And then you recycle the clay and start again. Failure is just clay returning to its source. It's not an ending. I took a deep breath, centered a new ball of clay and tried again. This time I didn't think about the height. Thought about the lift. I focused on the cool, slick feel under my palms, the hum of the wheel, the solidity of Silas at my back. The cylinder rose, tall and surprisingly even. There, he whispered. You're not just making a pot. You're learning to trust the process. I was the clay. And tentatively with him. Our dates became more frequent. Not grand gestures but shared ordinary joys. A silent movie at an indie theater with a live pianist. A scavenger hunt through a flea market for the ugliest mug. He won with a horrific cat-shaped abomination. We cooked dinner together in my kitchen, a simple pasta, and it felt more intimate than any fancy restaurant with Leo ever had. We really talked, about our past. I shared more about my illness, the fluctuating reality of it. He listened, asked thoughtful questions about management, never once framing it as a burden. It's part of the landscape of you, he said one evening as we washed dishes. Like the clay's memory, its tendency to warp or crack if not treated right. It's not a flaw. It's a characteristic that informs the making. You have to work with it, not against it. No one had ever described it like that. To Leo it had been a random, inconvenient fault line. To Silas it was integral to the topography. 2 months after the cease and desist, I had a minor flare-up. Just a day of deep fatigue. I texted Silas to cancel our plans to see a band that night. No problem at all, he replied. Rest. Can I bring you anything? Soup? Terrible movies? Soup would be amazing, I wrote back, a little weepy from relief. An hour later he was at my door with containers of homemade chicken noodle soup and a borrowed DVD of a famously cheesy 90s action movie. He didn't stay long. He set up the soup on my coffee table, put the movie in, and fluffed the pillow behind my head. I'll leave you to it. Text if you need anything. Even just to rant about the bad dialogue. You're not staying? Asked, surprised. He smiled. You're tired. Company is work. This is about rest. I'll see you when you're feeling brighter. He dropped a kiss on the top of my head, a gesture so sweet and asexual it melted me, and left. I cried a little then, but not from pain. From the sheer, overwhelming novelty of being cared for without an agenda, without a ledger being kept. It was care that asked for nothing in return, not even gratitude. The next weekend, feeling strong again, I invited him to a party at Maya's apartment. It was a big, loud affair full of her loud, wonderful friends. It was my first real foray back into a social scene where I might be seen as a single woman. I was nervous. Stay close to me, I whispered to Silas as we entered the cacophony. I'm your shadow, he said, handing me a drink. Or your slightly bulky, pottery-themed bodyguard. He was a perfect date. He talked easily with strangers, listened more than he spoke, and his hand found the small of my back in crowded spaces, a steady point of contact that grounded me. I felt happy, light. For a few hours the ghost of Leo was nowhere to be found. It was around 11, the party at its peak, when the universe decided to test my newfound peace. I went to the balcony for a breath of cool air. Silas was inside, debating the merits of different kiln types with a fascinated architect. I was alone, looking out at the city lights, when I felt a presence beside me. I turned, expecting Maya or one of her friends. It was Ben. The mutual friend who'd first called me with Leo's breakdown story. He looked uncomfortable, holding a beer like a shield. Elara. Hey. You look really good. Thanks, Ben, I said, my guard slamming up. The peace of the evening evaporated. Listen, he said, lowering his voice. I know you said not to, but I saw Leo last week. I stiffened. I don't want to hear it. It's not like before, he rushed on. He's different. He got your letter. Shattered him. He's in a bad way, Elara. Really bad. He's lost his job, not fired, but he quit, couldn't focus. He just sits in that apartment, according to his roommate. He's not eating. He looks like a ghost. He's not bad-mouthing you anymore. It's just broken. He says he's finally realized the magnitude of what he did. I stared at the glowing tip of a distant antenna. A cold stone settled in my gut. This was a new tactic. The tragic redemption arc. No longer the persecutor, but the penitent. It was more dangerous because it tugged at the oldest, most conditioned parts of me. The caretaker, the fixer. That's very sad, I said, my voice flat. He should see a therapist. He is, Ben said, leaning in. That's the thing. He is. He's trying. He's drowning. He keeps saying he just needs to see you once. To apologize to your face. Not to get you back, he says he knows he doesn't deserve that. Just to clear the air. So he can maybe start to forgive himself. The audacity took my breath away. His journey to self-forgiveness was now somehow my responsibility to facilitate. Ben, I said slowly, turning to face him fully. He betrayed me in the most fundamental way and then spent months trying to destroy my reputation. There is clear. It's clear because I walked out of the toxic fog he created. I owe him nothing. Not even the audience for his repentance. Ben looked pained. I know he messed up royally. But people can change, can't they? Seeing someone you once loved in that much pain, isn't it just human to offer a little grace? Grace. The word felt like a trap. The kind of grace that would, I knew, immediately be interpreted as a crack in my armor, an opening to be exploited. My humanity is not defined by my willingness to be an emotional prop for his recovery, I said, my voice beginning to tremble with anger. His pain is a consequence of his actions. It is his to manage. Not mine. I saw Silas then through the glass door. He'd been watching. He saw the distress on my face and began to move toward the balcony. Before he could reach me, Ben played his final card. He said to tell you he's at the grind. Right now. The coffee shop on 4th where you had your first date. He's there every night, he said, just in case. Just hoping for a chance to say he's sorry. He said he'll be there until midnight. The grind. Our first date. He was weaponizing nostalgia, staging his remorse in the set of our beginning. It was a masterstroke of emotional manipulation. Silas opened the balcony door. Everything okay out here? His tone was neutral, but his body was positioned subtly between Ben and me. It's fine, I said, but my eyes betrayed me. Ben took the opportunity to slip away. Just think about it, Alara. No pressure. I just had to tell you. When he was gone, Silas didn't ask. He just waited. He's at the grind, I whispered, the words tasting like ash. Our old place. Begging for a chance to apologize. Ben says he's a broken man. Silas was silent for a long moment, looking out at the city. A broken man, he mused. And he thinks the glue is your forgiveness, delivered on his chosen stage. What do I do? The question was a plea. You do what the clay does when it's been poorly fired and comes out of the kiln cracked, he said, his voice low and sure. You acknowledge it's damaged. You might even study the crack to understand what went wrong. But you don't try to refire the same piece. It will only shatter. You take the lessons and you use them to inform the next piece. The new piece. He turned to me, his gaze steady. You don't go to the coffee shop, Alara. You stay at the party with your friend who brought you soup when you were sick. You finish your drink. You maybe even dance. You live in the life you're building now, not the museum of his regrets. His words were the anchor I needed. He wasn't telling me not to feel. He was giving me a framework to understand the pull I felt, the seductive, toxic lure of the tragic narrative, and a better path forward. I didn't go to the grind. I stayed. I drank my drink. I introduced Silas to more of Maya's friends. And later, when a cheesy pop song came on, I pulled him into a small space near the speakers and we danced. It was silly and sweaty and perfect. But as Silas drove me home, the image lingered. Leo alone in the warm glow of the grind, waiting for a ghost. It didn't fill me with vengeance or even pity. It filled me with a profound, weary understanding. He was still writing his story, casting himself now as the tormented hero seeking atonement. And he still wanted me as his co-star. I was done with his productions. I had my own quieter, more beautiful show to live. The curtain had fallen on us long ago. I was not coming out for an encore. I didn't go to the grind. But the knowledge that Leo was there performing his penance in our old haunt became a low-grade hum in the back of my mind. It was less a temptation than a morbid fascination, like watching a storm you know is moving away. Silas's metaphor of the cracked pot stayed with me. I'd studied the crack. I understood its origin. Now I had to focus on the new piece. And the new piece was taking unexpected, beautiful shape. With Silas, it felt less like building and more like uncovering something that had always been there, buried under layers of performance and fear. We spent our weekends exploring, hiking in state parks where the only sounds were our footsteps and the wind, visiting a sensory deprivation float tank on a whim, a hilarious, disorienting experience we dubbed the Great Soup Experiment, and spending hours in his studio, often in comfortable silence, each engrossed in our own creation. One rainy Thursday afternoon I was at the studio, painting intricate patterns on a set of tiles he'd made for a kitchen backsplash. He was at the wheel, his shoulders rolling with the rhythm of his work. The radio played a low, jazzy tune. My parents are coming to town next weekend, he said, not looking up from the growing form of a vase. They want to meet you. My brush froze mid-swirl. A droplet of cobalt blue splattered on the newspaper. Meet me? Yeah. They're curious. And my mom in particular is incapable of subtlety. She's been decoding my texts for hidden happiness indicators for months, apparently. He glanced at me, a wry smile on his face. You can say no. It's soon. I just told them I was seeing someone wonderful and they pounced. Someone wonderful. The casual certainty in his voice made my heart do a slow, expansive flip. This wasn't a let's see where this goes ambiguity. He was telling his parents about me. He was proud. The old fear whispered, too fast. You're fragile. You'll disappoint. I pushed it down. This was Silas. He knew about the cracks. He'd seen the rubble in the courtyard. I'd like to meet them, I said, and found I meant it. But you have to promise me your mom won't ask about my reproductive timeline or my credit score over dinner. He laughed. I promise she'll try, and I promise I'll deflect with a detailed analysis of wood ash glazes. It's the only thing that works. The following Tuesday, the universe, ever perverse, decided to test my resolve in a way I hadn't anticipated. I was leaving my therapist's office. A new, wonderful woman named Dr. Evans who specialized in trauma and chronic illness, feeling emotionally wrung out but clear. The session had focused on disentangling my self-worth from Leo's narrative. As I stepped out onto the sunny street, fumbling for my sunglasses, I literally walked into someone. "Oh, excuse me, I'm so sore." The apology died in my throat. It was her. The blonde. The woman from the windowsill. She looked different in the harsh afternoon light. Less ethereal, more real. She was holding a takeaway salad from the place next door. Her eyes, a pale blue, widened in recognition, then flickered with a complex mix of guilt, defiance, and pity. "Alara," she said. It wasn't a question. All the air left my lungs. My carefully constructed piece shattered like cheap glass. I was back in that rainy twilight, hearing his voice wrap around her. I couldn't speak. "Look," she said, shifting her weight. "This is awkward. I wanted to say something. To you. For a while. You have nothing to say that I want to hear," I managed, my voice brittle. "Maybe not. But I'm going to say it anyway." She took a breath. "I didn't know. That day. He told me you were basically separated, that it was over and everything but name. He said you were unwell and he was just sticking around out of pity until you were stable enough to be on your own." Each word was a needle precisely placed. The narrative he'd built for her was even more grotesque than I'd imagined. "He said you were emotionally manipulative, that you used your health to control him," she continued, her gaze not quite meeting mine. I believed him. I felt sorry for him. I thought I was helping him escape. A bitter laugh escaped me. "Congratulations on your humanitarian mission." She flinched. "I ended it. A few weeks after you saw us. Not because of you, but because the things he started saying about you even after you were gone. It was so venomous. And then it shifted. He became obsessed, but not with me. With getting you back or destroying you. I realized I wasn't a person to him either. I was just a tool. To hurt you, then to make himself feel better." I stared at her. She was seeking absolution. From me. The sheer arrogance was staggering, but beneath it, I heard a tremor of genuine shame. "I'm sorry," she said, the words quiet. "I'm sorry I was a part of hurting you. And I'm sorry I was too naive to see him for what he was." The storm of emotions inside me, rage, grief, vindication, crystallized into one sharp, clear point. This woman was irrelevant. Her apology was for her own conscience, not for my healing. "Your apology is noted," I said, my voice cold and formal. "But it changes nothing. You were a prop in his play. I'm no longer an audience member. I suggest you move on and find a better casting director for your life." I turned to walk away, my legs feeling like wood. "He's not well, Alara," she called after me, her voice losing its contrite edge, taking on an urgent, gossipy tone. "Like, seriously. He's talking about you all the time. To anyone who will listen. He says you've ruined him. He has this box of your things he carries around. It's pathological. A box of my things." The image was so bizarre, so grotesquely sentimental, it made my skin crawl. I didn't turn back. I just kept walking around the corner until I was out of sight. Then I leaned against a brick wall, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. I didn't cry. I trembled with a pure, undiluted fury. He was a poison, seeping into every corner of my life, even months later, through intermediaries and chance encounters. The blonde's apology was just another form of contact. Another way for his toxic drama to touch me. I pulled out my phone. My finger hovered over Silas's name. I wanted to call him, to hear his calm voice, to have him tell me about clay and cracks and moving on. But a new, stubborn part of me reared up. I couldn't run to him every time Leo's ghost rattled its chains. I had to learn to exorcise it myself. Instead, I texted Dr. Evans's office and scheduled an emergency session for the next day. Then I went home. I didn't paint. I didn't draw. I put on loud, angry music, the kind I never listened to, and I cleaned my apartment with a ferocious energy. I was scrubbing the baseboards when my phone rang. It was Maya. "Hey, I just got the weirdest text from Sarachin. She says she saw you talking to some blonde woman outside your therapist's office and you looked upset." Everything okay? The network was still alive. Gossip traveled at light speed. It was her, I said, sitting back on my heels. The windowsill girl. Maya's gasp was audible. What the hell? What did she want? To apologize. To unburden herself. To tell me Leo is not well and carries a box of my things. Oh, for fuck's sake, Maya snarled. The melodrama never ends. Did you tell her to take her performative guilt and shove it? In more polite terms, yes. Good. You know this is just another triangulation, right? He probably found out she saw you and is now hoping her confession will soften you up, make you feel some twisted sense of responsibility for his mental decline. He was right. It was all connected. Every thread led back to him pulling at me. I know, I sighed. It made it all feel fresh again. The betrayal. The lies. Of course it did. He's an infection. But you're on antibiotics, babe. Therapy, Silas, me, your art. You're healing. This was just a nasty little flare-up. Write it out. Do you need me to come over? I can bring wine and we can ritualistically burn a picture of his face. I smiled for the first time since the encounter. No. Okay. I'm just sitting with the ick. But I'm okay. After we hung up, I felt stronger. I had named it a flare-up. Not a relapse. Not a failure. A temporary exacerbation of a chronic condition. I could manage it. When Silas called that evening, his voice warm and easy, asking about my day, I didn't lie. I ran into someone from my past today. It was unsettling. I gave him the brief, unvarnished truth. He was quiet for a moment. Do you want to talk about it? Not really. The details aren't important. It just felt like someone trying to hand me back a bag of garbage I'd already taken to the curb. I could hear the smile in his voice. And did you take it? No. I told her my hands were full. Good. A comfortable silence settled between us. You know, the kiln is cooling right now. The reduction firing from last week. It'll be ready to open tomorrow. It's always a surprise seeing what the fire did. You should come. Whatever happened today, fire transforms things. It's good to remember that. The invitation wasn't to hide from the pain, but to witness transformation. It was perfect. I'll be there, I said. The next afternoon in his studio, the kiln was still warm to the touch. With a sense of ceremony, Silas put on heavy gloves and unbolted the small, insulated door. A wave of heat and the smell of hot earth wafted out. He reached in and began to unload the shelves, placing each piece carefully on a heat-proof table. It was magic. The raw, matte glazes had been transformed. The cobalt had turned a deep, lustrous purple in some places, a smoky gray in others. The iron red had flashed with hints of metallic copper. My vase, the one with the dark band at the top, was stunning. The oceanic blue-green had pooled and separated, creating a fluid, dreamy effect. The black band at the rim had not stayed solid. It had broken into a delicate spiderweb crackle of fine white lines, like frost on a dark pond. Sankai crackle, Silas said, admiring it. The glaze shrank more than the clay body as it cooled. It's a flaw, technically. It's the most beautiful part, I whispered, tracing the air above the fine white lines. The dark boundary hadn't sealed it shut. It had become intricate, complex, beautiful in its brokenness. I agree, he said softly. He looked from the vase to me. The fire did that. Pressure and heat. It didn't destroy it. It revealed a hidden pattern. Made it stronger. I met his gaze, understanding dawning. The encounter yesterday, the lingering poison of Leo. It was the fire. It was pressure and heat. And I was still here. Not shattered. Not even cracked. But transformed with a new, more intricate strength visible in the places I'd been stressed. He handed me the vase. It was warm, almost alive in my hands. It's yours. It was more than a gift. It was a mirror. I held the physical proof of my own resilience. Thank you, I said, my voice thick. Not just for the vase. For the metaphor. For the space to be unsettled and still be welcome. The meeting with his parents was 4 days away. The encounter with the blonde had shaken me, but as I cradled the warm, crackled vase in my lap, I felt a strange gratitude. She had, inadvertently, thrown me back into the fire one last time. And I had emerged not burnt but glazed. Finished. I was ready. Not despite the cracks but because of them. The day of meeting Silas's parents dawned bright and clear. a stark contrast to the emotional hangover from my encounter with the blonde. I'd spent the week in a state of low-grade anxiety, which Dr. Evans had helped me reframe as excitement with a side of historical trauma. The difference was crucial. One was about the future, the other about ghosts. "You're not meeting Leo's parents," Dr. Evans had said in our session. "You're meeting Silas's. The script, the expectations, the entire play is different. You get to write your role this time." I clung to that. I chose my outfit carefully. A simple emerald green dress that felt confident but not trying too hard, with boots because they made me feel grounded. Silas was picking me up at 6. At 5:30, as I was applying a final swipe of lipstick, my phone buzzed. An unknown number, but with a local area code. A cold trickle of dread traced my spine. I almost didn't answer. But the part of me that was tired of flinching, the part that felt the strength of the crackled vase on my shelf, made me swipe to accept. "Hello." A ragged breath. Then his voice. Not the smooth, performative tone from the texts or the pleading one Ben had described. This was raw, stripped, and terrifyingly real. "Elara. Please. Don't hang up." It was Leo. My knees went weak. I sat heavily on the edge of my bed. The sound of his voice was a physical shock, a key turning in a lock I'd thought I'd welded shut. All the legal barriers, the silence, the moving on, it vaporized in an instant, leaving me in that rainy room. "How did you get this number?" My voice was a thin thread. I remembered your old PIN. From your laptop. You used it for a pharmacy account once." I guessed. His words tumbled out, desperate, breathy. "I know I'm not supposed to call. I know about the letter. I heard you were seeing someone." "Of course. The Gossip Network. Ben, maybe, or some other well-meaning traitor." The news of my moving on had finally reached him, and the cease and desist was no longer enough to contain his panic. "That is none of your business," I said, forcing steel into my tone. "Is it him?" The question was a sob. "The guy from the art store? I saw you together. Weeks ago. You were laughing. He'd been watching. Following." The violation was so profound it stole my breath. The world tilted. "You followed me?" The whisper was barely audible. I was in the neighborhood. "Please, Lara. You can't be with him. Not after everything we had." His voice broke completely. I'm not eating. I can't sleep. I quit my job. Everything is gray. I'm a ghost. And you're just moving on? With some Potter." The disdain he loaded into the word Potter was vintage Leo. A flicker of the old, dismissive him, peeking through the hysterical penitent. It was the crack in his performance, and it ignited my anger, cutting through the shock. "What I do and who I do it with is no longer your concern," I said, each word a chip of ice. "You made that choice. You ended us the moment you kissed her and called me a burden. The rest is just you refusing to accept the consequences." "I was wrong," he screamed into the phone, the sound so sudden and violent I jerked it away from my ear. "I was stupid and weak and wrong. I'll say it 1,000,000 times. I'll get on my knees in the middle of the street and say it. But what we had, it was real, Elara. It was the most real thing in my life. You can't just throw it away for a hobbyist. This was it. The unfiltered truth." His remorse was not for my pain but for his loss. His breakdown was not guilt, but the tantrum of a child who'd broken his favorite toy and was now enraged that it wouldn't magically reassemble itself. The pity I might have felt curdled into something cold and hard. "It wasn't real for you," I said, my voice terrifyingly calm. "If it was real, you wouldn't have trashed it to the first pretty audience you found. What we had is over. It's ash. And I'm not sifting through it for you anymore. Do not call this number again. If you contact me or come near me or near Silas, I will call the police and I will get a restraining order. This isn't a letter. This is your final warning." There was a long, shuddering silence on the other end. When he spoke again, the hysterical edge was gone, replaced by a hollow, chilling defeat. "You hate me." "I don't hate you, Leo," I said, and realized it was true. Hate would have been a connection, a fire. I felt nothing but a vast, empty distance. "I'm indifferent to you. You are a stranger who causes me stress. I am removing the stressor. Goodbye." I hung up. My hands were trembling so badly I dropped the phone. I wrapped my arms around myself, rocking slightly on the bed. The adrenaline crash left me nauseous and hollowed out. He'd found a new crack, my new happiness, and tried to hammer a wedge into it. The doorbell rang. Silas. For a wild moment I considered not answering. Canceling. Falling apart. Letting Leo win this small, terrible battle. But the image of the crackled vase, beautiful in its fired strength, flashed in my mind. The fire transforms. I took 3 deep, shuddering breaths. I splashed cold water on my face, reapplied the smudged lipstick with a steadying hand, and went to the door. Silas stood there holding a small bouquet of sunflowers. He took one look at my face, the 2 bright eyes, the pale cheeks, and his smile vanished. What happened? Leo called, I said, my voice miraculously even. 2 minutes ago. His expression darkened, but not with jealousy or anger. With protective concern. Are you okay? Do you need to stay in? We can order in, I'll tell my parents. No, I interrupted, grabbing my jacket. No, we're going to dinner. I am not giving him this night. I am not letting him fire this kiln. I already went through the fire. I'm done. A slow, proud smile spread across Silas's face. He didn't ask for details. He didn't offer platitudes. He just nodded, handed me the sunflowers, and said, then let's go dazzle my parents. The restaurant was a cozy Italian place, all warm wood and the smell of garlic. His parents, Richard and Diane, were already seated. Richard had Silas's kind eyes and a firm handshake. Diane was a whirlwind of artistic scarves and immediate, probing warmth. Alara. We've heard so much. Silas never stops talking about your eye for color, you know. Sit. Throughout the appetizers I felt like I was moving through a dream. My body was here, smiling, answering questions about my work. I'm a graphic designer, so it's digital, but I'm rediscovering analog drawing. But part of me was still back in my bedroom listening to that shattered voice on the phone. Diane, perceptive as a hawk, leaned in during a lull. You seem a little far away, sweetheart. Everything all right? Silas tensed beside me. I placed a hand on his arm under the table. I've got this. I'm sorry, I said, offering a genuine if weary smile. I had a bit of a shock right before coming. An unpleasant ghost from my past decided to rattle his chains. It threw me, but I'm recalibrating. Please forgive my distraction. Richard's bushy eyebrows shot up. Diane's eyes softened with immediate, fierce empathy. A ghost, you say? The kind that doesn't know it's dead and should be quiet. Exactly that kind, I said, grateful for her metaphor. Well, Richard boomed, raising his wine glass. To silencing ghosts. And to the living, who are much more interesting. The toast broke the tension. As the main course arrived, something shifted. The act of naming the ghost, of acknowledging its presence but refusing to let it dominate the table, seemed to banish it. I began to truly listen to Richard's stories about his engineering projects, to laugh at Diane's tales of Silas as a boy, covered head to toe in mud, trying to sculpt the backyard. I asked them questions. I learned that Diane was a retired music teacher and that the 2 of them had met in a community orchestra. I saw the easy, deep affection between them, a partnership, not a performance. It was a revelation. At one point, Diane turned the conversation to my art. Silas says you've started drawing again. That's wonderful. What stopped you before? The old, shame-filled answer rose. Life. A partner who thought it was trivial. My own fragility. But I was in a new story now. I lost my voice for a while, I said, choosing my words carefully. I let someone else's narrative about what was important drown out my own. It took leaving that narrative behind to find the quiet to hear myself again. Diane reached across the table and patted my hand. It takes tremendous courage to leave a story, especially a familiar one. Even a bad story can feel safer than a blank page. Her understanding was so acute it brought a lump to my throat. Silas has been helping me see that a blank page isn't scary. It's full of potential. She smiled at her son, a look of profound pride on her face. He's good at that. Seeing the potential in raw material. After dessert, as we were saying goodbye in the bustling restaurant doorway, Diane pulled me into a tight, lavender-scented hug. You, she whispered in my ear, are a breath of fresh air. And stronger than you know. Don't let the ghosts win. In the car on the way home, the exhaustion finally hit me. I slumped in the passenger seat, the adrenaline fully spent. You were magnificent, Silas said quietly, taking my hand. I can't even imagine what that call was like. And then to come and be that present with them. You left me in awe. I just kept thinking about the vase, I confessed, my eyes closed. The one from the reduction firing. It went through the worst heat and it came out more beautiful. I didn't want to let his poison ruin the glaze on this night. On this. I gestured between us. He pulled over onto a quiet residential street, put the car in park and turned to face me. The streetlight painted his face in gold and shadow. Alara, what he did tonight, that's harassment. That's beyond a letter. We should report it. The word we undid me. Not you should, but we. He was beside me, not in front of me, not behind me. Beside. Tears finally spilled over, hot and silent. I'm so tired of fighting him. I just want him to disappear. I know, he murmured, thumb brushing away a tear. But sometimes making someone disappear requires drawing a line so bright and legal they have no choice but to vanish. Let me help you. Let's go to the police station tomorrow. Just to file a report, to start the paper trail. For the restraining order if it comes to that. Not as a drama. As a boundary. The final, fired glaze boundary. I looked into his eyes, saw no fear of drama, only a calm, determined resolve to protect the peace we were building. He was offering me the tools to build a permanent wall, not just a temporary barrier. I nodded, too weary to speak. He drove me home and walked me to my door. This time he didn't leave. He came inside, made us both tea and sat with me on the couch while I trembled, not crying, just shaking apart in the aftermath. He didn't try to fix it. He just held me, his presence a steady, silent anchor in the storm of my delayed reaction. Later, as I drifted toward sleep with my head on his chest, listening to the solid beat of his heart, I realized something. Leo's phone call, horrific as it was, had served a purpose. It had forced the final firing. It had taken the separate pieces of my new life. My therapy, my art, my friendship with Maya, my growing love for Silas, even my legal stance, and subjected them to a sudden, intense heat. And in that heat they had fused. They were no longer separate elements I was juggling. They were a single, solid, durable vessel. I was no longer getting over Leo. I was living a life in which he was irrelevant. His desperate, final attempt to crack me had only succeeded in proving I was already fired. I was hardened. I was sealed. I was at last done. We went to the police station the next morning. The process was bureaucratic, unnerving, but Silas was a steady, pragmatic presence beside me. We filed an incident report for the harassing phone call, citing the previous cease and desist letter as evidence of a pattern. The officer, a weary-looking woman with kind eyes, took it seriously. "This is the right first step," she said, stamping a copy for my records. "It establishes a timeline. If he contacts you again, call us immediately. That's when we can move forward with more serious measures." The report was a cold, clinical thing. It transformed Leo's emotional tsunami into a series of checkboxes and case numbers. It was profoundly empowering. I wasn't just a woman complaining about an ex. I was a citizen documenting a crime. Walking out into the bland government plaza sunlight, I felt lighter. The ghost had been named, catalogued, and filed away in a beige folder. It wasn't gone, but it was contained. "How do you feel?" Silas asked, squeezing my hand. "Like I just took out the trash," I said. "The really smelly, bulky kind that's been festering for weeks." He laughed, the sound echoing off the concrete. "A perfect description. Now I believe we have a date with some very high-stakes pottery. A commissioned sake set for a terrifyingly discerning sushi chef. Your steady hands are required." The normalcy of it was the best medicine. In the studio, the world narrowed to the texture of clay, the scent of wet earth, the focus required to trim the delicate foot of a cup. Leo had no place here. This was a sanctuary he could not pollute. Life, my real life, began to flow with a new, unencumbered current. Weeks bled into months. Spring deepened into early summer. The restraining order never became necessary. The police report, it seemed, had been the final, bright line Leo couldn't cross. The silence from his quarter felt permanent this time, not like the eerie calm before, but like the silence after a storm has truly passed, leaving clean, washed air behind. My relationship with Silas deepened in the quiet spaces. It was in the way he remembered my favorite tea and always had it in the studio. It was in the comfortable silence we shared on his worn sofa, reading separate books, our legs tangled. It was in the way he never flinched when I had to cancel plans due to a flare-up, simply reshuffling his own to bring over soup and bad movies. One evening we were at my apartment. I was attempting to make a new recipe, a complicated coconut curry that was threatening to revolt. He was at my kitchen table sketching designs for a new series of planters. "The basil is burning," he said mildly, not looking up from his sketchpad. "I know," I yelped, frantically stirring. The onions weren't caramelizing and now everything is happening at once. "It's like a glaze firing," he said, a smile in his voice. "You can prepare perfectly, but once the kiln hits cone 10, all hell breaks loose. You just have to ride it out and hope for the best." I managed to rescue the curry. It was edible. As we ate at the small table, the late sun streaming in, I felt a surge of such pure, simple contentment it was almost painful. "What?" he asked, catching my expression. "I was just thinking," I said, swirling a piece of naan in the sauce. "This. So undramatic. In the best way. The opposite of exhausting?" he ventured, his eyes knowing. The word didn't sting anymore. It was an anthropological artifact from a past civilization. "Yes. Just easy. Not in a lazy way. In a, the pieces fit without forcing way." He reached across the table, his clay-roughened fingers lacing with mine. "Good." The invitation to the gallery show came on thick, creamy cardstock. Silas's first solo exhibition in 3 years, at a prestigious gallery in the Arts District. The title was Kintsugi, The Light in the Break. "It's not just about the Japanese art of repairing broken pottery with gold," he explained, uncharacteristically nervous as he showed me the final pieces being crated. "It's about the idea that the breaks, the stresses, the firings, they aren't flaws to be hidden. They're the history of the piece. They're what make it unique, what let the light in. The gold just highlights the beauty of the survival." The pieces were breathtaking. Vases with dramatic, deliberate cracks filled with a luminous gold resin. Bowls that had been shattered and reassembled, the seams glowing. And there, in the center of the proposed display, was my vase, the one with the black and crackled rim from the reduction firing. A small placard next to it in the layout read, "Sanctuary. Reduction-fired stoneware. The boundary becomes a map." He'd included me, not as a muse but as a fellow artist, as part of his story. The night of the opening was a whirlwind. I wore a deep blue dress that made me feel like night sky. Silas, in a simple black shirt, looked handsome and intensely himself. The gallery was packed. Collectors, critics, friends, his beaming parents. I watched him move through the crowd, talking about his work with a passionate clarity that was utterly captivating. He was in his element. Maya appeared at my elbow, champagne flute in hand. "Okay, I'm not an art person, but this is incredible. And that one," she pointed to Sanctuary, "is my favorite. It looks fierce and calm. Like you." I squeezed her arm, too full of emotion to speak. As the crowd began to thin, I found a quieter corner near a large, gold-veined sculpture. That's when I saw him. Leo. He was across the room, partially obscured by a group of people, but it was unmistakably him. He was thinner, almost gaunt, his clothes hanging loosely. He wasn't looking at the art. He was staring at Silas, who was laughing with the gallery owner, his hand resting warmly on the small of my back from a distance. A cold wave crashed over me, not of fear but of a profound, weary disgust. He'd found a way in. To this sacred space, to this night of triumph. I didn't panic. I didn't run. The old, frozen statue of that rainy day was gone. I felt the solid floor under my feet, the weight of my dress, the memory of the police report in my filing cabinet. I excused myself from Maya and walked not towards Leo but towards the gallery owner, a sharp-eyed woman named Anya. "Anya," I said quietly, leaning in. "See the man in the gray sweater by the pillar? He's harassing me. He's not supposed to be here. Could security please ask him to leave?" Anya's gaze flickered over, professional and assessing. "Of course." Immediately. She lifted a hand and a large, discreet security guard appeared at her side. A few whispered words and the guard moved with quiet purpose. I turned my back, walking towards Silas. I didn't watch. I heard a low, tense exchange, the sound of shuffling feet, and then the distant chime of the elevator. When I dared to glance, the space by the pillar was empty. Silas, sensing the shift in my energy, leaned down. "Everything okay?" "A ghost tried to haunt the gallery," I said, meeting his eyes. "I had it evicted." Understanding dawned in his face, followed by a flash of anger, then immense pride. He didn't ask for details. He just pulled me close, pressing a kiss to my temple. My fierce, calm sanctuary. Later, as we were helping pack up the leftover wine and cheese, my phone buzzed in my clutch. A text from an unknown number, but I knew. It had to be him. So you looked happy. He can't love you like I did. He doesn't know the broken parts of you. I do. I always will. The words were meant to be a poison dart to sow doubt. But they landed on soil that had been transformed. I didn't feel hurt or angry. I felt a distant, clinical pity. He was still in the dark, obsessed with brokenness as a defining, secret truth. He didn't understand that Silas saw the breaks not as secrets to be known, but as history to be honored, as the very places where the light and the gold could enter. I showed the text to Silas. His jaw tightened, but he waited for me. I typed back a single sentence, my fingers steady. He doesn't love the broken parts. He loves the whole vessel, cracks and all. You only ever loved the idea of breaking me. I blocked the number. Then I took Silas's hand, pressing it against my cheek. I'm done. Really truly done. He's just noise now. The exhibition was a triumph. Sanctuary sold within the week to a renowned collector. My life was full of creative work, of deep friendship, of a love that felt like coming home to a well-built, light-filled house after years lost in a maze. One afternoon months later, I was in the studio. I was no longer a guest, but a partner. My drawings were pinned alongside his glaze recipes. We were working on a collaborative piece, a large platter. He had thrown it, and I was painting an intricate, swirling design around the rim, a pattern inspired by the frost-like crackle of Sanctuary. My phone, face up on the table, lit up. It was a call from Ben. I hadn't spoken to him in almost a year. A flicker of old anxiety sparked, but I let it die. I answered on speaker, my brush continuing its steady course. Alara? Hey. It's Ben. Hi, Ben. My voice was neutral. Wasn't it? I don't know if you've heard. About Leo. I paused my brush. Silas looked up from his wheel, his hands stilling. I haven't, I said. He's moving. To the West Coast. His parents are basically relocating him. He checked himself into an inpatient program a while back. For depression and other stuff. It seems like he's finally getting real help. Ben's voice was hesitant, hopeful. I thought you should know. That he's getting better. And that he's leaving. The news settled over me. There was no schadenfreude. No relief because the threat had already been neutralized in my soul months ago. Just a faint, quiet hope for a stranger's recovery. I'm glad he's getting the help he needs, I said, and I meant it. I wish him peace, Ben. Truly. Far away from here. There was a long pause. You sound good, Alara. I am, I said, watching Silas's hands resume their gentle, confident motion on the wheel. I'm very, very good. After I hung up, the studio was quiet save for the hum of the wheel and the soft scratch of my brush. Silas didn't speak. He just watched me, his eyes asking the silent question. I looked at the platter we were making. The clay was centered strong. The design I was painting was not meant to cover or distract. It was meant to adorn, to celebrate the form. It was a map of where we'd been, not a scar of what had been broken. I met his gaze and smiled, a real, easy, unburdened smile. It's over, I said. Not as a revelation but as a simple statement of fact, like noting the weather. Now hand me the gold luster. This line needs a little light. He passed me the tiny bottle of precious metallic paint, his fingers brushing mine. I dipped my finest brush and touched it to the delicate, crackled pattern I'd drawn. The gold caught the studio light, blazing a tiny, brilliant path along the imagined fault line. It wasn't a repair. It was a celebration. The day I saw him kissing another girl was the day the old vessel shattered. And from those shards, with patience, heat, and this new, steadfast love, I had not just been mended. I had been entirely remade. The end.